everyone, and welcome back. You know how much we love diving deep into the strategic thinking realm here. And today we're tackling a big one. Wardley Mapping Doctrine.
Yeah.
We've got excerpts from Introduction to Wardley Mapping Doctrine ready to unpack. It's about going from, hoping for the best with decisions to having that solid framework, like a compass in the jungle almost.
I have confidence. That's what I love.
Yeah, exactly. Especially in this world that just seems to get more complex by the day.
Absolutely, yeah.
So whether you're leading a team, running a business, or just trying to up your own strategic game, this deep dive is for you. We'll break it all down into those aha moments that you can actually use. Ready to get started?
Let's do it.
All right, so the source we're working with, it kicks off with the Wardley Mapping Strategy Cycle. And it's not just a set it and forget it kind of deal, is it?
Not at all.
Yeah.
It really highlights how dynamic strategy has to be.
Yeah.
Especially these days. Think of it like navigating a landscape that's always changing. You're constantly assessing your position, where you're headed, and making adjustments.
Okay, I like that. So walk us through this strategy cycle. What are the key phases?
Sure. So it all begins with defining your purpose and vision. That's your North Star.
Right.
From there, you map out the landscape, understanding your market, your industry, your competitors. Then we've got to consider the climate, those external factors like trends, tech advancements, even geopolitical stuff. It all plays in.
It's a lot to keep in mind.
Definitely. And that's where doctrine comes in. It provides the guiding principles to navigate that landscape effectively. And of course, none of this matters without strong leadership to actually steer the ship.
So true. I'm intrigued that leadership gets its own phase in this cycle.
Yeah. It emphasizes that even a brilliant strategy is just a piece of paper if it isn't executed well. Leadership's about aligning everyone, getting them on board with a vision, and turning those strategic decisions into real-world action.
Implementation is key. So this cyclical nature, it really drives home the point that strategy isn't a one-time thing. You're always learning, adapting based on what's happening. Which brings us to the heart of this deep dive. Doctrine. Now, when I hear that word, I'll be honest, I kind of think rigid rule book, but it sounds like it's really about adaptability, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Think of doctrine less like a set of rigid rules and more like, how about a ship's anchor in a storm? It's about those guiding principles that can be applied to any situation to help you make those sound judgments, even when things get turbulent.
Okay, so less about always do this and more about here's how to approach decision-making with that strategic mindset. I like that. But let's get real. How does having a doctrine actually translate into a more successful organization? What are the tangible benefits?
Great question. And this source really breaks it down in terms of how doctrine helps organizations learn and adapt, which is key. It all starts with creating a common language and understanding, kind of like standardization.
Oh, interesting.
Like imagine a basketball team where everyone uses different terms for plays, total chaos.
Oh, for sure. Missed shots left and right.
Exactly. But in a work environment, when you have that shared language, from marketing to development to customer service, it eliminates confusion. Everyone's on the same page.
It's like they're all using the same map, navigating toward the same destination. I love that.
Exactly. And it leads to better communication, smoother collaboration, and a more aligned organization.
Makes perfect sense. When everyone's speaking the same language, you avoid errors, reduce redundancy. It's just more efficient.
Right. And that shared understanding also leads to more strategic decision-making, which is another huge benefit. Doctrine provides those proven guidelines, those strategic guardrails, almost to navigate uncertainty. Instead of just relying on gut feelings, you can make choices aligned with the bigger picture.
It's like having that trusted advisor in your back pocket. But the world waits for no one, right? Things are constantly changing. How does doctrine help organizations adapt and thrive in that kind of environment?
That's where it really shines. Doctrine isn't about being static. It encourages continuous evaluation and refinement of your practices. It's about constantly asking what's working, what needs adjusting, how can we adapt to reach our goals.
It's about building that agility and responsiveness into the very DNA of how you operate.
Absolutely. And that's what sets organizations apart in today's world, not just weathering the storm, but adjusting your sails and charting a new course when needed.
I love that visual, adjusting your sails as the winds change. Okay, so we've established that doctrine is about having those guiding principles you can apply to lots of situations. But let's get specific. This source dives into 4 phases of Wardley Mapping Doctrine, each like a level of maturity in how organizations use these principles.
Think of it as a journey. like those classic video games where your character levels up their abilities.
Wow.
Each phase builds upon the last one, leading to a deeper, more sophisticated understanding of doctrine.
Okay, you've definitely piqued my curiosity. Hit me with these phase titles. Where does this strategic journey begin?
Well, every hero's journey usually starts by facing their demons, right?
Yeah.
In the world of Wardley Mapping Doctrine, it all begins with phase I, stop self-harm.
Wow. That's certainly attention-grabbing right out of the gate. It makes you think, how am I getting in my own way? What are these self-inflicted wounds that we need to address?
It's about getting into the nitty-gritty, those common mistakes that trip up organizations, no matter their size or industry. We're talking communication, development, operations, those little missteps that turn into big obstacles.
It's about uncovering those blind spots, those unconscious habits that can sabotage our best intentions. Oof, I'm feeling a little called out already, but hey, you gotta be aware of it to fix it, right?
Exactly. Awareness is key.
All right, well, we are about to get real about those self-inflicted wounds in communication, development, and operations when we come back. Don't go anywhere, strategic thinkers. This deep dive is just getting started. All right, strategic masterminds, welcome back. We're diving deep into Wardley Mapping Doctrine, and we're about to tackle those self-inflicted wounds in phase I. Stop self-harm.
We're going to shine a light on those common mistakes, the ones that can trip up even the best organizations,
Yeah, those sneaky traps we set for ourselves without even realizing it. So last time, we left off with uncovering those wounds related to communication, development, and operations. Where should we begin?
Let's start with communication, specifically the importance of knowing your users. And, deeply understanding their needs, their motivations, everything.
It's more than just basic demographics, right? It's about getting into their heads, building those user personas, understanding their pain points.
Exactly. But it's not just about customers. It's about understanding all your stakeholders, employees, investors, even regulators. They're all users in a way.
Right. Each group has their own set of needs, and neglecting any of them, well, that's a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. Imagine, rolling out a software update that drives your employees crazy, or overlooking some regulatory change. Ouch.
Yeah, talk about self-inflicted wounds. So how do we gain this deep user understanding?
This source suggests a multifaceted approach. Doing your customer research, engaging with stakeholders regularly, staying informed about regulatory changes, and most importantly, always seeking feedback. Make understanding your users part of your DNA.
It's like building empathy for all those different groups, seeing things from their perspective, and then using that to inform every decision.
Exactly. It's about creating those win-win situations, building trust, and delivering products and services that truly resonate with your users.
Makes sense. So knowing your users is step one. This source also emphasizes staying laser-focused on those needs throughout the development process.
100%. It's got to be woven into the very fabric of how you develop things, from brainstorming to implementation.
Like having that user persona up on the wall, constantly reminding everyone, who are we building this for?
I love that. It's about keeping that focus, that why behind everything you do.
Yeah, because otherwise you risk building something nobody wants. Which brings us to another big one in the development process. Bias. We've all got it right.
It's human nature.
Yeah.
But it's something to be aware of because it can really impact our decisions, sometimes in ways we don't even realize.
Unconscious bias can be a real problem.
For sure. This source stresses the importance of building diverse teams with different backgrounds, bringing those different perspectives to the table, and of course, relying on data.
Data-driven decisions over gut feelings.
Exactly. And maybe even bias training to help people recognize those unconscious biases and mitigate them.
It's about being intentional and inclusive in your approach to development. So you're considering everyone, not just a select few.
Right, because otherwise you're potentially excluding a huge chunk of your users from the get-go.
Exactly. And another efficiency killer. Duplication. Ugh, it's the worst.
Oh, tell me about it. Wasting time on something someone else is already doing. Nobody has time for that.
It's like reinventing the wheel, a total waste of resources. And it can cause so much confusion down the line.
This source recommends some solutions. Things like, clear process mapping so everyone knows who's doing what. Regular code reviews are helpful too.
Right. Catch those redundancies early on. It's about streamlining things so everyone's working together effectively. Which reminds me, this emphasis on efficiency ties into that better for less mindset in phase 3.
It's all connected. But for now, let's stick with stop self-harm, specifically another important development principle, using appropriate methods.
Because there's no one-size-fits-all approach, right?
Right. This source emphasizes choosing methodologies that fit the project's needs, its complexity, the team's skills, your timeline, budget, all of it.
It's about being flexible, adaptable, and making those strategic choices about your approach to development.
Exactly. Be intentional. Don't just blindly follow the latest trends. Sometimes the tried and true methods are the best fit.
It's about working smarter, not harder. Okay, we've covered a lot in development. What about the operational side of stop self-harm?
This source stresses a principle that's often overlooked: knowing the details.
It's about getting into the weeds, understanding how things actually work on a practical level.
Sometimes those seemingly insignificant details can make or break a project.
Right. You need to understand those on-the-ground realities. It's like planning a road trip without checking your car's engine first.
Perfect analogy. This source really emphasizes not relying solely on abstract models. Get your hands dirty, develop a deep understanding of those day-to-day operations.
Bridge that gap between the strategic plan and what's actually happening. This ties into that bias towards action we discussed earlier, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Ground those strategic plans in reality. The source suggests some ways to do this: detailed process maps, regular operational audits, cross-training among staff.
I love the idea of cross-training, getting different perspectives involved.
Right, and something as simple as management by walking around, seeing things firsthand, can be so valuable.
It's about bridging that gap between theory and practice. Okay, I'm convinced sweating the small stuff is crucial. What else?
Last but not least, in this stop self-harm phase, learning. Learning never stops, especially in our world. What's the key takeaway here?
It's about being systematic in how you approach learning and using data to guide your decisions.
So moving beyond those gut feelings and anecdotes. Exactly. It's about establishing those systems for collecting reliable data, building those analytical skills, and defining clear metrics.
Turning that data into actionable insights. So it's not just about gathering data, it's about using it effectively.
Right. Building a culture where data drives improvement.
Okay, I'm loving this. We've covered communication, development, operations, and now learning. It seems like we've successfully navigated phase 1, stop self-harm.
Level 1, complete. But our journey through Wardley Mapping Doctrine continues.
And we're back, ready to explore phase 2 of Wardley Mapping Doctrine, becoming more context-aware.
It's all about expanding that perspective, looking beyond our internal processes to understand the bigger picture.
Right, because we can't make effective decisions in a bubble. So we're climbing that strategic watchtower, ready to survey the landscape for those make-or-break factors we might have missed before. What's the key takeaway here?
It's like this. Imagine having the most efficient ship in the world, but you're sailing blindly, no map, no compass. You're bound to hit something eventually. Understanding the external factors, the currents that are shaping our environment, that's what this phase is all about.
It's about being aware of those big picture forces, those winds of change that can either propel us forward or send us way off course, right?
Exactly. Things like technological advancements, shifting customer behaviors, even those global events that seem to come out of nowhere.
Those curveballs can really throw a wrench in your plans.
Yeah.
So how do we actually become more context aware? What are the actionable steps we can take?
Well, the source material we're looking at, it starts with a communication principle that might surprise you. Fostering a bias towards openness within the organization.
Okay, now that's interesting. Because honestly, my first instinct is to protect strategic information. Keep those plans close to the chest.
It's a common instinct, for sure. But this source argues that being more transparent, encouraging open communication, it actually leads to a stronger shared understanding.
So breaking down those silos, encouraging everyone to share their insights, even if it means challenging the status quo.
Exactly. Create that environment where people feel comfortable speaking up, asking those tough questions, sharing what they're seeing on the ground.
Because sometimes those on the front lines, they have the most up-to-date view of what's really going on.
Absolutely. And this source suggests some ways to foster that openness. Things like making decision-making processes transparent, so people understand the why behind the what.
I like that, instead of just because I said so.
Right. Encourage those healthy debates, make strategic information accessible. It's about moving away from that need-to-know mentality.
Towards a more inclusive and informed approach to strategy, which makes sense. When people feel in the loop, they're more engaged, more invested.
Exactly. It's about collective responsibility, facing those challenges as a united front.
Now let's shift gears a bit to the development principles highlighted in this phase, because context awareness is just as crucial when you're building products and services.
Absolutely. What insights can you share on that front? This source material emphasizes the importance of prioritizing outcomes over rigidly sticking to contracts or those super detailed project plans.
So being flexible, adaptable, adjusting course when needed.
You got it. It's about recognizing that things change, and sometimes clinging too tightly to the original plan can actually hold you back. Stay focused on the desired outcome, even if the path to get there needs a little tweaking.
Love that, because as they say, no plan survives contact with the enemy. Flexibility is key.
Absolutely. And this requires a certain level of trust and empowerment, right? You can't have teams afraid to make a move without layers of approval.
Right. Give people the autonomy to make those judgment calls based on their understanding of the situation.
Exactly. It's about fostering that iterative process, accepting that you won't have all the answers up front. And that sometimes the best solutions, they emerge through experimentation.
It's that whole fail fast, learn fast mentality, right?
You got it. Now, this source material doesn't stop there. It also introduces a framework called Fire Fast, Inexpensive, Restrained, and Elegant.
Fire. Okay, that sounds intense. Tell me more.
It's all about optimizing your development efforts, being deliberate and efficient, making every line of code, every design choice really count.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between moving quickly and being strategic, making sure every action has a purpose.
Exactly. It's like crafting a haiku, every word carefully chosen for maximum impact. And the best part is, this FIRE principle isn't just for software development. It can be applied to pretty much anything. Marketing, processes, even strategic planning itself.
It's a mindset, always striving for that elegant solution, maximizing impact while minimizing waste. I like it. What else?
Well, building on that idea, using appropriate tools is also crucial. It ties directly into being context-aware.
Because what works for one project might not work for another. It's about choosing the tools that fit the context.
Exactly. Understanding the strengths and weaknesses of your tools and making those strategic choices to set your team up for success.
Which brings us to another key principle, pragmatism.
Pragmatism.
Yeah.
It's about being grounded in reality, right?
Yeah.
Focusing on what actually works.
Precisely. It's about being flexible, adaptable, and always focusing on results.
Embracing those course corrections, viewing them as opportunities for growth, not setbacks. Exactly. It's about having that fail fast, learn fast mentality. Now, we've covered a lot on the development side, but this becoming more context-aware phase also offers valuable insights for operations.
Okay, let's dive into those operational insights. What does this source material highlight?
It starts with the importance of managing inertia.
Inertia, that resistance to change we all experience from time to time.
Exactly. It's a powerful force within organizations. It can manifest as a reluctance to try new things, to adopt new technologies, or even just to deviate from the way things have always been done.
And in a world that's constantly changing, that resistance can be a major obstacle to progress.
Absolutely. This principle of managing inertia is about understanding the reasons behind that resistance, addressing those concerns, and ultimately finding ways to overcome it.
So it's about communicating effectively, highlighting the benefits of change, and bringing people along for the ride.
Exactly. Turn that resistance into momentum. Now, get ready for this next one because it's a big one. Managing failure.
Okay, failure. That's a tough one. We're conditioned to avoid it at all costs.
Right. But this source challenges that perspective, arguing that failure is an inevitable part of progress, especially when it comes to innovation.
It's about reframing our relationship with failure, seeing it as an opportunity to learn and improve rather than something to be ashamed of.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture where people feel safe taking risks, knowing that even if things don't go as planned, those setbacks will be viewed as valuable learning experiences.
Because let's be real, if you're not failing occasionally, you're probably not pushing the boundaries enough.
Exactly. And this source material offers some advice on managing failure effectively. Things like pre-mortems, to anticipate potential problems, having those contingency plans in place.
Those just-in-case scenarios. Love it.
Right. And when things do go wrong, having clear incident response protocols is key. But the most important element is fostering that blameless culture.
A blameless culture. Tell me more.
It's about creating an environment where people feel safe speaking up when mistakes happen without fear of punishment. Because when you punish mistakes, you discourage people from taking risks and sharing those valuable learning experiences.
It's about focusing on finding solutions and preventing similar mistakes in the future, not pointing fingers.
Exactly. Turn those failures into valuable data points. And that leads us to another important operational principle, prioritizing effectiveness over efficiency.
Now that sounds counterintuitive, don't get me wrong. Efficiency is great, but it's not the be-all and end-all.
Right. This source argues that while efficiency is important, it shouldn't come at the expense of effectiveness. It's about making sure those actions are actually driving towards your goals, delivering real value.
It's not just about doing things faster or cheaper. It's about making sure those efforts are aligned with the bigger picture.
Exactly. It's about asking, is this actually moving the needle? Not just, can we do this with fewer resources?
Strategic efficiency. I like it. What's next?
The final piece of the becoming more context-aware puzzle is, you guessed it, learning.
Learning never gets old. So, how do we approach learning in this context-aware way?
The source we're looking at emphasizes cultivating a bias towards action and learning.
So it's not enough to just passively absorb information. We need to actively engage with it, experiment, learn by doing.
Precisely. Embrace that hands-on approach.
Because sometimes the best way to learn is by diving in headfirst, trying things out and seeing what happens.
Exactly. And this bias towards action encourages organizations to create those safe spaces for experimentation, where people feel empowered to test their assumptions.
It's about fostering that culture of curiosity, experimentation, and continuous learning.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Wow, we have covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. From understanding those self-inflicted wounds to navigating the ever-changing external landscape, it's been quite a journey.
It has. But remember, this is just the beginning of your journey with Wardley Mapping Doctrine. There are even more layers to uncover, more insights to guide your strategic thinking.
Well, we've got to save something for next time. A huge thank you to our expert for walking us through these insightful concepts, and a big thank you to all of you for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, strategic thinking is an ongoing process, a journey of continuous learning and adaptation. Until next time, stay curious, stay strategic, and keep asking those tough questions.